Welcome to the Two Wars channel. Much has been written about the heroism of Soviet tankers. The war was not won thanks to superweapons or Stalin's genius plan. The war was won through countless acts of heroism. The Red Army tanks engaged in battle with a superior enemy, rammed trains, or destroyed entire columns of German equipment. But this feat is unique because a single tank managed to halt an entire German corps, and in this video I will tell you how it happened. First of all, I want to say that I am not a jingoistic patriot and I don't portray Soviet soldiers as mythical Rambos, mowing down enemies at the speed of sound. But such acts of courage did indeed occur in that war. They were among the Germans too, but not as widespread since the war was not initially fought on their territory. So don't accuse me of embellishing the facts. I strive to tell the story as objectively as possible. So these events took place near the small Lithuanian town of Raseiniai. In 1941, a rather large-scale battle occurred there, but we will focus on a specific episode that I want to tell you about. After the war began, Army Group North received orders to move towards its main objective, Leningrad. On the front section in question, the 6th German Tank Division was advancing, which was divided into two groups, Raus and Zachendorf. The first group was commanded by General Erhard Raus. Standing in their way was the 2nd Tank Division, Major General Solyanikin. However, the forces could not be considered equal. The fact is that the Soviet division had significant problems with a shortage of fuel and ammunition. At best, it would have lasted a couple of days of fighting. The first German offensive stalled because the Germans did not expect to encounter Soviet heavy KV-1 tanks on this front. The German army in this sector mainly had Czech Pas 35Ts with 37mm guns and pre-reformed T3S, also with weak guns. They couldn't inflict serious damage on the Soviet machines, so they retreated. But despite the brief success, Solyanikin's division couldn't advance on the Germans. They couldn't advance on the Germans due to a lack of fuel, and the Germans weren't sitting idly by either. They began to gradually encircle the Red Army forces. At that point, Solyanikin decided to retreat, and it was generally the right decision because at the early stage of the war, the lack of operational movements, including retreats, was the main reason for the creation of huge encirclements that later destroyed the Wehrmacht forces. After the Soviet forces began their retreat, Erhard Raus's group prepared to fortify their new bridgehead for further advancement. The battle subsided and it was possible to do military routine, move heavy artillery and repair military equipment. The Soviet KV-1 tank drove onto the only road. In addition to the chaos caused by the Soviet tank among the Germans, it also cut the telephone line they used to communicate with the neighboring group. The tank became a real thorn in the side, blocking communications between German units and skillfully shooting down supply trucks. As it turned out later, the Red Army tank simply ran out of fuel, and it so happened that the vehicle stalled right on this road. When it became clear that there was only one tank, Raus decided to destroy it. Moreover, this had to be done as quickly as possible to avoid delaying the advance on Raseiniai and to prevent the Soviet soldiers from having time to regroup. But before I tell you how the Germans tried to eliminate the immobilized KV-1 tank, I want to remind you to subscribe to my channel and click the bell so you don't miss a new video. Erhard Raus made his first attempt using 50mm anti-tank guns. The guns were positioned half a kilometer away from the tank and opened fire. Shots began to thunder and through binoculars the Germans observed accurate hits on the tank. It seemed the problem was solved and they could celebrate victory, but it wasn't that simple. The tank sharply turned its turret and returned fire. After a few volleys, the German anti-tank guns were already smoking heaps of twisted metal. Behind the destroyed guns, Germans and columns of military equipment were crowding. Time was passing, but the problem remained unresolved. The second attempt to destroy the troublesome KV-1 was more cautious. Wehrmacht soldiers brought in a 150mm howitzer and opened fire. They were unable to achieve a direct hit, and glancing blows did no damage to the tank. It was then decided to use an 88mm anti-aircraft gun. It was supposed to deal with that tank for sure, but once again the German soldiers faced misfortune. The fact is, at the moment the gun was being set up, a shot rang out from the Soviet tank and a split second later the German anti-aircraft gun was seriously damaged. Here's what Raus himself writes about it.
It turned out that the tank crew and commander had nerves of steel. They calmly watched the approach of the anti-aircraft gun, not interfering with it. As long as the gun was moving, it posed no threat to the tank. Moreover, the closer the anti-aircraft gun is, the easier it will be to destroy it. A critical moment in the duel of nerves arrived when the crew began preparing the anti-aircraft gun to fire. It was time for the tank crew to act. While the artillerymen nervously aiming and loading their guns, the tank turned its turret and fired first. Every shell hit its target. The heavily damaged anti-aircraft gun fell into a ditch. Several crew members were killed and the rest were forced to flee. The tank's machine gun fire prevented them from retrieving the gun and recovering the dead.
Meanwhile, as the Germans were puzzling over the problem of the stubborn tank, the day was coming to an end and night was approaching. Using the darkness, the Germans came up with another cunning plan. The sapper team was supposed to place 2 charges on the tracks and the barrel, but this attempt also failed because the charges did not cause significant damage to the tank. By dawn, Rouse's patience had finally run out, and he began to act. The essence of the new plan was to use light tanks to distract the KV-1, while another 88 mm anti-aircraft gun was brought up from behind to the necessary distance to finally take out the tank. The attention of the Soviet tank was successfully diverted. The soldiers brought up the gun and opened fire. A shot rang out, hitting the target, then another and another and another. A total of 6 shots were fired. The tank's gun was raised upwards. The German sappers moved towards the tank to get a closer look at their triumph. Out of 6 shots, only 2 penetrated the armor. But when the Wehrmacht soldiers got closer, the turret turned and the Germans scattered. A lone soldier did not flinch and threw a grenade into the tank's breech. There was a shot, and the tank fell silent for good. The Germans were so impressed by the heroism of the Soviet soldiers and buried them with military honors. Erhard Rouse himself later wrote about it.
Deeply moved by their heroism, we buried them with full military honors. They fought to their last breath.
The exact names of the tank crew could not be determined, but it is likely that Senior Lieutenant Ivan Zakharovich Treshchenko and the company's junior technician warrior Pavel Mikhailovich Kirikov fought in this battle. They managed to delay the German advance for an entire day. You might say that one day is not much. How could it hinder the German advance? Well, it did. Such acts of selflessness happened very often and were present on almost every section of the front. It was these small delays that led to the halt of the Barbarossa plan. What do you think? Was the main reason for the German delay the invincible tank or the experienced crew? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to my channel. All of this will greatly help its promotion.